Rodriguez here with another St. Joseph chat. And today I have the honor of having Aaron Joseph, St. Joseph Apostle #1. Aaron, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thank you, Joe. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you. So we're going to jump right into it. You love our patron so much that you changed your last name legally to Joseph. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I entered the church back in 1990, actually on December 8th, 1990. And then I discerned religious life in 92, 93 with a few different communities. And, in some of these communities, as we know, some traditional communities, they take a new name. And, um, and so, basically I was just, when I was discerning with these communities, I was just known as Brother Aaron. And and then I noticed that like one time I was sorting mail and I noticed that, Brother Elias was known by, and I'll just throw out a name, as John Smith in the world. And, he would still get mail as John Smith, even though, his brother Elias. And when I was sorting the mail, I was thinking, if I ever did take a new name, I would want to do it legally. So it was just a thought. And then my pre-spiritual director, who Father Stanley Smolensky,
Mhm.
once in a while we would talk about, our own spiritualities, and we would talk about, what we would do if we were to take a new name. And so, we both knew that, I would take, Aaron Joseph. And then one day after morning mass, I went into the rectory, and he comes out into the kitchen, and he's like, it's all set. And I'm like, well, what's all set? He says, I asked the pastor if we could call you Brother Aaron Joseph.
Oh,
And at the
yes.
time when he said it, it just didn't feel right. Sometimes you have these ideas, and then once something goes to initiate something, and so the pastor said, that's okay, just put it in the bulletin. So they put it in the bulletin. And it was funny because our school principal at the time, she didn't like the idea because my vows were private vows, they were public vows. I wasn't part of a church approved
Okay.
association. So and then actually somebody called up the chancery and complained. so
Oh,
so
brother.
Father Stanley mentioned it to me. I won't get into more detail about it, but he just mentioned it. And when he mentioned that somebody had complained, I kind of blurted out, "Well, I'll just do it legally." But then I quieted down and I said, "Well, Lord, only if you want it to happen. Your will be done." And
Right.
then later on, I was nominated for a school volunteer of the year for the archdiocese. Every school has two. For our parish school, I was nominated this one year, and so the church secretary was putting it into the bin, and she put it in as, my last name used to be Brooks, and she put it in like Aaron Joseph and in parentheses Brooks, and I'm like, and she showed it to me, and I'm like, oh, I hate that. It sounds like you're half in and half out. And she immediately just said, well, you can change it legally. Now, I had never told her, a, the backstory, which had just given you. And so I just listened. And
Mhm.
she had a situation where one of her children had to go through a process, with somebody. And so she was aware of how to go through the legal means of changing a name.
Mhm.
And I remember the day only because, everything kind of fit into the place afterwards. And so it was September 30th of 1996. Not that the year matters, but um and uh and so she's like, we'll call up the probate court and find out, how long it will be before your hearing. And I'm like, oh, you have to have a hearing. And then, I found out that you have to have $100 filing fee. And so at the time I was living at home with my foster father. I grew up as a ward of the state, three foster homes, two institutions. And so I still, even though at that time I was 34, yeah. But I was still, living at home. And so I called up my foster father and kind of begged him for $100 because I wasn't working. I was just volunteering. You
Hmm.
know, I'd made private vows back in 1995, and so I was just helping out at my parish while I was still discerning, you know, what God wanted me to
Right.
do. And so the next day, um, you know, the secretary and I went down to the probate court, and I was given the application, and I filled out the application and handed the secretary the $100 bill, and and so I asked her. I said, "Well, you know, can you tell me when the hearing might be?" And you know, and the thing is, when I found out that, you know, I'm sorry, when I did call the probate court the day before, she said that it would probably be like 3 weeks. And so I was looking at the liturgical calendar because I believe God works with that. And I was thinking, well, in 2 weeks would be Saint Teresa of Avila. That would be great because she loved Saint Joseph as a father. I thought that would be the most ideal. And and when I, you know, that day when I handed in the application and $100 fee, and I asked the secretary, and she's like, "Well, we'll mail it to you." And I'm like, "Pretty please," you know, just. And so she just, you know, flipped over her calendar, and she's like, "Well, on October 15th, we're wide open." And so, you know, usually when I tell the story, I say, you know, on 10/15 at 10/15, I was legally known as Aaron Joseph. So it was really cool. But you know, you can see divine providence in it, and at least I think so. So
Well, it worked out beautifully. Thanks be to God.
yes, and you know, and for my own thought process, I look at, you know, one of the meanings that they say of the name Aaron is one of light or enlightener. And so the way I look at it is, you know, there's a couple meanings that I see. The idea of Aaron Joseph is, you know, one, a son of Joseph, you know, taking Joseph as my family name. And then also the idea of being a light to Joseph. And so that's the way I look at that. But it's more just for myself that, you
Mhm.
know, like they say, with great gifts come great responsibilities. And so it's just something as a reminder to me that I have to live in such a way, and also, you know, share what I know as far as my apostolate goes, to be a light to Joseph. So,
So something that just came to me, Aaron, in the Old Testament, when they were deciding who the high priest was, his rod blossomed as a sign
yeah,
from God. And that's traditionally how we say Joseph was chosen to be the spouse of Our Lady. His
there,
rod
there,
blossomed.
there yes, there is that also. Yeah,
So that's a beautiful little connection too with the two names.
there is.
So
Sometime you know, maybe after the call, I'll send you there's an iconographer that he made an icon, you know, basically with the name Aaron Joseph, you know, tying in Aaron and Saint Joseph. Did it independent of me. He just did it. I'm like, oh, I gotta
um,
get that. Yeah.